Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a briefing on climate, jobs, and the economy today. My name is Aracely Campa Ramirez, Senior Deputy Director for External Affairs and Policy here at GO-Biz. A few comments before we get started. This call is meant as a briefing for our stakeholder and legislative partners. If you are a member of the media, we'd ask that you please hang up now. We will be taking questions at the end. If you'd like to ask a question, please submit them at any point during the call today using the Q&A function and indicate who the question is for. Now, with that, I'd like to introduce our presenters. Today, you'll be hearing from Shea, Assistant Cabinet Deputy, Office of the Governor, Governor Newsom. We have Dee Dee Myers, Director, Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development and Senior Advisor to the Governor. We have Secretary Natalie Palugyal, Secretary of the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. And we have Assela joining us, Director of the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. And I'd also like to acknowledge a couple of additional folks that are joining us on the call. We have Chris Cook joining with Department of Finance, as well as Ryan Miller. We have Uduak Joe Antuk, California State Oil and Gas Supervisor for CalGEM. They will also be available to answer any questions at the end of the call. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Shea to get us started with some introductory remarks. Joe?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aracely. Hi, everyone. I'm Shea, Assistant Cabinet Deputy for Governor Newsom. Really excited to talk about climate, jobs, and the economy, investments in the governor's January budget proposal with you all today. I want to give a special shout out to Anna, Jim, Keeley, the DOF team, including Chris Cook, as well as Director Myers, Secretary Palugyal, and Director Assela for their vision in making this, a truly historic proposal. And also want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in, for your tireless engagement, efforts, and advocacy. And really just want to keep this short. We know that COVID-19 triggered the deepest recession in our state since the Great Depression, which the governor and legislature then responded to last year with the California Comeback Plan. We also know that prior to the pandemic, California's economic growth over the past decade plus shows that our economy can grow because of our climate goals and not in spite of them. And so the proposal unveiled by the governor on Monday really ties these two threads together. It's a proposal built on the framework of last year's budget with investments aimed at making our greatest threat into our greatest opportunity as we continue to recover from the economic impacts of the pandemic. Now, there's a lot to like about the jobs and economic implications of the $37 billion multi-year climate budget proposal that the governor outlined on Monday, from the $10 billion down payment on California's ZEV future to hundreds of millions in tax credits for California businesses developing climate change fighting technology. The governor likes to say that California is where the future happens first. And this is a proposal that embraces California's status as a leader in creating the innovative technology that's really going to power quality job creation. I'm particularly proud of the proposals aimed at unlocking the tremendous potential in inland California regions like Imperial County through the development of Lithium Valley and building out Kern County's capacity for clean energy innovation and becoming a national leader in safely plugging and abandoning legacy oil wells. And I should also note that, both of these proposals were developed thanks to extensive collaboration with folks at the local level, and that we're excited about further strengthening that connection between the state, and community partners through investments in climate workforce development training and innovation hubs that promote inclusive economic growth. So I really just want to close on this note. We know that solving the climate crisis we find ourselves in is going to take a level of commitment that is unparalleled in our state's history. We've also seen how this commitment already can yield positive results from the many success stories of California innovators and entrepreneurs. And we know that there's still incredible opportunity to leverage our climate investments in order to advance equity and create quality jobs, all while we continue to be a world leader in clean technology, innovation, and production. So I'm, really excited that the, Monday proposal by the governor takes us in that direction. And I want to pass the mic to the person I think we are all really here for, and that's Dee Dee Myers, Director of the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for that great overview of where we are. And thanks everybody for joining us today. As Joe made clear, we believe that what's good for the environment is also good for the economy. And I think this budget invests in that idea in so many ways, which I'm going to walk through along with my colleagues, Secretary Palugyal and Director Assela. As Joe mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic triggered the worst US recession since the Great Depression. We lost millions of jobs, businesses were closed, livelihoods disrupted, and while our recovery with the help of state and federal emergency assistance programs has been impressive by any measure, there's still a lot more to be done, especially in those communities and industries hardest hit. As you've probably seen, since February, California has created nearly 1 million new jobs, which is unprecedented, and that robust recovery is ongoing. In November alone, the state accounted for nearly 22% of the nation's new jobs, and we experienced our largest unemployment rate decrease since February. But again, there's still a lot of work to do, and that's why we're focused not just on recovery, but an equitable and broad-based recovery that emphasizes clean jobs. That is a priority in this year's budget. So with that in mind, I want to focus on two topics this afternoon: zero-emission vehicles and new tax credits to incentivize green technology and job creation. So first, ZEVs. This year's budget adds $6.1 billion for ZEV development, with a particular focus on underserved communities. And that brings the total investment over 5 years to $10 billion, an unprecedented amount. Those ZEV funds fall into basically four main buckets. The first is low-income, zero-emission vehicles and infrastructure. This builds on the prior year's $250 million to take the Clean Cars for All initiative statewide. So this year's budget adds an additional $256 million in funds to support low-income consumer purchases, and then another $900 million to expand affordable and convenient ZEV infrastructure, including a range of charging options, batteries, hydrogen, in low-income neighborhoods. The second bucket is heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles and infrastructure. That includes $935 million to add 1,000 zero-emission drayage trucks, so down at our ports, and 1,700 zero-emission transit buses. There's another $1.5 billion in the education budget to enable approximately 3,300 zero-emission school buses. So again, heavy-duty vehicles across the board. There's also another $1.1 billion for zero-emission trucks, buses, and off-road equipment, and for the fueling infrastructure to support that, and $400 million to support port electrification. So again, and that's leveraging both batteries and fuel cells. So again, a wide range of heavy-duty vehicles and infrastructure. The third bucket is zero emissions mobility. That's $419 million for sustainable community-based transportation equity projects, and they will increase access to zero emission mobility in low-income communities, reducing vehicle miles traveled and improving the air quality. This also includes supporting clean mobility options, sustainable transportation, and equity projects. These plans have already been developed by their communities, and in order to address mobility and help communities identify their needs. So this will support that ongoing work. And finally, the fourth bucket is emerging opportunities. There's $200 million to invest in demonstration and pilot projects in high carbon emitting sectors like maritime, aviation, rail, other off-road applications, as well as support vehicle grid integration at scale. So together, these investments help maintain California's role as the hub of the ZEV market and the ZEV market creation and innovation, and provide economic development opportunities while also accelerating zero emission solutions in the hardest to reach segments of our transportation system. And we all know that transportation is the number one polluting segment of our economy. So next, I want to talk a little bit about tax credits. First, as you've probably seen, the proposed budget restores the temporary limitation on the use of net operating loss deductions and research and development tax credits. That's 1 year earlier than planned, and we're excited because we think that invests in our innovation economy broadly. In addition, we have two new tax credits. The first is the Innovation Headquarters Credit, the California Innovation Headquarters Credit. This is a new program for California headquartered companies that invest in activities and technologies that mitigate climate change. It provides $250 million a year for 3 years, and sits on top of the existing R&D credit. So that will be administered by the Franchise Tax Board. The second is something we call the Green Energy Technologies Credit. It's another new credit that will be $100 million a year for 3 years. And this credit will fund pre-development costs for technologies in the green field, including things like electric vehicle manufacturing and infrastructure, geothermal, lithium extraction and battery manufacturing, little preview of Lithium Valley, long duration storage, methane emissions, how we address those, and hydrogen technologies to reduce reliance on natural gas. The credit is going to be awarded by a yet to be created new clean energy board in GO-Biz that will develop in partnership with the community going forward. The idea is, another kind of novel component of this particular credit is that it will include a provision that as companies become profitable, a share of their profits will be repaid, will be used to repay the tax credit. Those that don't reach profitability, it will be forgiven. So again, to be developed, but a novel approach that we think will increase not only access to capital for businesses, but opportunities to make sure the benefits are shared more broadly. I want to say a word about local government budget sustainability fund that we've added. We know that as regional leaders work to implement the $600 million Community Economic Resilience Fund, or SURF, the state has the potential to complement these efforts and provide bridge funding to local governments that are working to reap the economic benefits of that transition to carbon neutrality. So the budget will include trailer bill language, creating a grant program aimed at local entities facing significant challenges or losses in their near-term budgets that demonstrate a clear, as they move towards sustainability, and demonstrate a clear commitment to advancing more climate resilient economies. We want to help make up those shortfalls. Starting in fiscal 23-24, this $450 million program will help stabilize local governments as their regional and local economies look to move toward those opportunities, take advantage of those opportunities, invest in climate technology industries, and assist in that transition while expanding the workforce, creating new opportunities, and moving toward more resilient local revenue going forward. Finally, I want to talk about Lithium Valley development. Lithium is becoming an increasingly critical resource as both the state and the world move toward clean energy, a future that really helps us tackle the climate crisis. Lithium is a critical component to batteries that we need to power electric vehicles, enable 100% clean electrical grid, and move the state's homes and industries away from fossil fuel, allow us to store that energy. It turns out that the state has abundant untapped lithium reserves, including in geothermal brine that's more than a mile underground near the Salton Sea, and you all may have read about this. So with that resource, the state's poised to become a global leader in the deployment of a new environmentally sound set of technologies that can co-produce lithium with renewable electricity from geothermal power plants in the Imperial Valley. So it's both fueled by a sustainable renewable power, but it also is a new technologies that will be much less environmentally challenging than the way lithium is currently produced in most parts of the world. That will allow us to build out a world-class battery manufacturing ecosystem in tandem with this lithium production, providing a domestic and California-based source of lithium and clean processing. So that could create tremendous opportunity in the Salton Sea region, quality jobs, community benefits, sustainable renewable power, and this vital component of the new clean economy. So we're really excited about the possibility there. And through by investing in this and through the economic development incentives that we're working on, the administration really can create a robust infrastructure that will, again, create incentives to advance clean energy markets in California, ensure that all Californians share in the benefits from these new projects in this new sector, and develop labor standards that will deliver both community benefits while also creating jobs and protecting workers. So it could become a model in the clean energy sector that could guide our state engagement in other opportunity areas like offshore wind that support our clean energy goals, maintain high environmental labor standards, and engage proactively with affected stakeholders, because that's a key, making sure that communities are part of the conversation, part of the process, and reap some of the benefits. So anyway, we're very excited about it. So with that, I want to say thank you, and I will hand it over to Secretary Palugyal.
Thank you so much, Dee Dee. Hi, everybody. I am Natalie Palugyal. I am the Secretary of the Labor and Workforce Development Agency. I've been in this role now for 4 months. I've been able to meet many of you over the course of my time here and my transition into this role, and I look forward to meeting more of you in the following months. You know, I keep reiterating this in a lot of the presentations that I've been making this week. It is very exciting to be part of a budget and a vision, because at the end of the day, that's what budgets do. They lay out a vision for the state. They talk about our priorities. And I'm really proud to be part of one that is emphasizing the importance of cross-agency collaboration, cross-agency budget investments, and partnerships in order to meet the goals, both from a climate perspective and an economic development perspective. You know, GO-Biz, myself, and my agency, Office of Policy and Research, we have been working in collaboration already to execute the long-term Community Economic Resilience Fund, which was included in last year's budget. And the purpose of that was to support economic growth and transition needed after COVID-19, highlighting the values of inclusivity and equity and climate justice. But this year's budget goes a little bit deeper. It recognizes the importance that our climate goals and policies are going to have for workers across the state. So, and when I say that, you know, I mean, there are going to be new opportunities for workers in emerging industries, and there will also be impacts for transitioning workers who currently work in oil and gas and who will have to make a shift in the medium to long term out of those jobs. And so this budget acknowledges both. And I'm going to talk a little more about how it dives a little bit deeper and focuses on workers as a component of economic development in support of our climate goals. I also want to say that the labor agency budget overall includes a lot of investments in continued high road training program development, pathways for workers, support services, training, and of course, safety and health. And all of these components integrate with the climate goals and specific investments for our agency under climate. I'm not going to cover all of them today, but I will talk specifically about those proposals in the budget that focus on workers and climate, and they are in 2 buckets. The first is for workers in the good movement sector, particularly in our ports, and the Port of LA, being one of the largest in the world, is clearly the focus of that. And then the other proposals are really focused on oil and gas workers. So I will go through those specifics right now. The governor's budget supports a $110 million investment over 3 years for a goods movement training campus at the Port of LA. And this training campus will support workforce resilience in the face of supply chain disruptions, but also the acceleration of the deployment of zero emission equipment and technologies in the San Pedro Bay. This year, my agency is establishing and overseeing a panel, an industry and worker panel that is focused on providing recommendations around zero emission equipment, automation, and the impact of workers at the Port of LA and at the San Pedro Bay complex overall. And this goods movement training campus is going to very much support kind of the needs of these transitioning workers and this transitioning industry. In the oil and gas sector, the budget also proposes $50 million to address the needs of oil and gas workers who are facing displacement from the workforce. So in addition to training and other sorts of job placement supports, this funding also intends to minimize disruptions to the livelihoods of workers and their families, and would provide broad support for funding for housing, groceries, utilities, childcare, all of those kind of wraparound issues that go along with transitioning from jobs and training. In addition to that, there's $15 million in the budget that addresses the need of well capping. So I think Joe earlier and Dee Dee might have mentioned the well capping program. $200 million of the budget is proposed for the Natural Resources Agency so that they can work on capping what we call orphan wells. And the $15 million that falls under the Labor Agency would fall under the Workforce Development Board and would retrain displaced workers from the oil and gas industries to fill these well capping jobs that are going to be very needed in the upcoming years. And then lastly, I want to just mention there is also $60 million proposed to restart the California Workforce Development Board's grant program that supports workforce development and training programs in industries that are aligned with the goals of the California Air Resources Board's climate change scoping plan. And so that's going to be an additional bucket of funding that is going to support training and workforce development for these industries and for these new demands from the worker perspective. With that said, I am going to pass the baton now to Director Sam Assela. He is the director of our Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and I want to thank everyone for their time today.
Thank you, Secretary Palugyal, for that incredible overview, and Director Myers as well. Again, I am Director of OPR. OPR, Office of Planning and Research, is the state's lead land use and planning agency that is tasked with cross-agency coordination and policy on policies and programs that are related to land use, climate change, and economic development, with the specific purpose of advancing the state's climate, transportation, conservation, and equity goals. As mentioned, this is a cross-departmental effort. OPR is very proud to be working very closely with my colleagues at GO-Biz and the labor departments to, in this case, to future-proof our economy and deliver good-paying jobs as part of the governor's and all of government's response to the climate crisis. Our work specifically out at OPR is pretty much equity focused and community led to ensure that as California grows, we are building communities and an economy that works for all Californians. Director Myers, outlined the envious economic growth California is explaining, but she also said we have a lot of work to do. And a lot of work to do is not all in California are benefiting from that growth. And what is an incredible opportunity that is provided by the governor's very inclusive and interconnected budget, as well as some of the programs that are underway, is there's such an incredible opportunity to actually link climate and economic development that is inclusive in this process. In my career over 30 years, I've never come across at a time where there's a tremendous opportunity because of the leadership of this state and the resources that are being put to address those issues. So as as we enter in another period of uncertainty due to the new Omicron variant, it is a reminder of the necessity to eliminate the long-standing inequities in California's economy and the communities that have been most impacted by it. It's no secret now, we all know the stark disparities that are caused or at least eliminated because of the last couple of years of our experience with COVID. So for that reason, we have to double down in our how we use equity as a lens and make sure that all Californians benefit, and then take advantage of the current situation we're in with resources to address both the intersection between climate and economic opportunities. Incredible disproportionate health and economic impacts that are experienced primarily by California's Black and Brown communities, to the devastation of the hospitality and tourism industries and the displacement of its employees and their families, to regions that are dependent on legacy industries such as oil and gas, as California looks to make the transition to a clean energy future. These are a few of the countless reasons, I think, why the Newsom administration and the state agencies are prioritizing inclusive economic planning that delivers good paying jobs and unleashes the clean technology revolution. I mentioned that we need to double down on these issues. So but as we double down on investments that are proposed as part of the 2022-2023 budget, the California Blueprint, it truly responds to a lot of the crises of the day, including COVID-19 and climate change. As we do that, it is very critical that our economic and climate strategies are intertwined. What do I mean by that? For example, through the last budget cycle, Office of Planning and Research was allocated $600 million to the SURF program that Director Myers mentioned, the Community Economic Resilience Fund, to continue to leverage California's diverse economies while also approaching economic planning and development differently by putting first workers and communities at the center of economic decision and making that investment. But also this year's budget, as was discussed, really actually goes concurrently with that kind of investment in terms of providing more resources to make sure that has a successful outcome. And also, like the development of the Lithium Valley shared by Director Myers earlier, the Community Economic Resilience Fund will support regions and local communities and institutions in developing new regional plans and investments strategies and projects that help diversify California's regional economies, develop good paying jobs, and truly unleash the clean technology revolution for which California has been a leader to this point. And recently, colleagues from my office and GO-Biz and California Labor and Workers Development Agency announced 13 draft regions, which will each receive $5 million to enable meaningful participation from labor, businesses, local communities, and other key stakeholders in the economic planning process, and identify projects and investments that they believe and the communities believe would accelerate the recovery from the pandemic, and then build in new sustainable industries and provide high quality jobs. In the next phase of the fund, the $600 million fund, $500 million will be awarded on a competitive basis to fund projects in localities across the region based on the plan's development. The local groundwork laid by this program is also an avenue for this year's investments, like the proposed $400 million local government budget sustainability fund mentioned by Director Myers, to support communities' sustained revenues as they transition their economies. As someone who has worked in cities around the US and the world, the approach that the governor and this administration and the state are taking in creating a formal structure for community-led inclusive economic development is incredibly unique and transformational. These kinds of opportunities come once in a lifetime in my experience, in my profession. So I'm very excited about the opportunities to work with community groups who are here today and across my colleagues at GO-Biz and Labor. So in closing, this year's proposed investments, just like last year's, represent an all-of-government response to the climate crisis. And just as important, these investments are rooted in economic and social justice as they aim to create good-paying jobs and other critical building blocks of a California for all. So I'm really excited. This is an incredible time, and I would encourage you to get engaged with us. And we want to obviously hear from you, but I'm looking forward to working with you and my colleagues in this incredible opportunity. So with that, I will turn it back to Director Myers. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Assela. Thank you for that. And and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. As you can tell, we have a lot to be excited about here. The scope of this climate package is really unprecedented. I know we use that word a lot in the last few days, but it's true. And I think it allows us to both build back from the economic crisis and the recession, but to do it in a way that leaves us stronger than when we started, including accelerating the transition to a clean economy. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to Aracely, who will lead us into the Q&A section.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dee Dee, and thank you all. What a great presentation, a lot of resources, and we're getting quite a few questions in the queue already. So if you haven't done so already, please submit those questions via that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And again, if you can indicate who the question is for, that would be fantastic. We do have a couple already lined up. So we will go ahead and have about 25 minutes or so for questions. Starting with first one here for Secretary Palugyal. Would it be possible to develop a special initiative to identify numbers of unemployed by category by either community, city, or zip code? In rural areas, this would be really helpful. Several of the efforts are focused on specific communities that are now lumped into a whole county. So, Secretary?
Yeah, and I apologize for not being on the video. I disconnected earlier. I will try my video again, and I hope I don't disconnect here. So thank you so much for the question. Yes, so currently under the Community Economic Resilience Fund work that our three agencies are working on together, one of the considerations and something that we've been looking at is precisely this. So offering the regions much more detailed data that breaks down in this way specifically, so that communities and particularly rural communities also can just, play a larger part in this economic development grant program, and also so that they just have better tools for planning. So more will be coming out on this, and I really appreciate that question. It's something we are working on.
Fantastic. And Secretary, while I have you, one other question for you. How long will the transition funds be available for the gas and oil workers? It will take years for the transition.
That's a great question. And I appreciate it because it's something we think about as well, right? This is not just a short-term transition of workers. So this budget, the way the funding is proposed is for 3 years. But really, we could think of this almost as a pilot, right? This is $50 million that we can use for a variety of uses for transitioning workers. And that's going to tell us a lot about what is needed, what those transitions are looking like, what the challenges are. And so I envision all of that information and all of those learnings are going to inform the future budgets for continued support.
Fantastic. Thank you, Secretary. I'll turn it over here to Dee Dee. We have a few questions around Lithium Valley. This one, they've now heard about Lithium Valley a couple of times as a resource to tap into for battery production. What about hydrogen? Is the state putting efforts into this sector as well, specifically hydrogen produced by renewable energy sources like wind and solar?
The short answer is yes. The governor's strategy to decarbonize the economy is all of the above, which includes, of course, hydrogen and green hydrogen in particular, which, as you know, is created by using clean energy. So we're happy to, there's more information about that in the California Energy Commission and CARB portions of the budget. So, but rest assured, there is money in there for a number of things, including advancing technology and the process of electrolyte, electrolyzation, where you split the oxygen in the water molecules to create hydrogen and oxygen. So we can send a link to that, but there is definitely funding for other sources of energy, including hydrogen.
Excellent, thank you. And a follow-up question on that, Dee Dee. We're being asked, how long will it take to deplete the lithium stores found in California? How do you plan on combating the environmentalists on lithium mining, considering they will be highly against further destruction of the environment?
Well, first of all, there's a large store of lithium in California, particularly, as we've said, in the Salton Sea Imperial Valley region. How long it takes to deplete will depend on how quickly the industry develops and how quickly it's able to process the existing stores of lithium. But the great news about Lithium Valley, as we're calling it, is basically most of the lithium that's being produced for the world comes from 4 countries: China, Australia, Chile, and Argentina. In Asia and in Australia, they use basically strip mining techniques, and in South America, they use basically evaporation techniques. Those are both fairly, they're not as bad as petroleum in terms of their effects on the environment, but they are rather hard on the environment. The technologies being proposed in Lithium Valley would both use the existing geothermal power that's there in the region, use that to extract the brine, and then extract the lithium using new processes, and then restore that water, that brine, back into the earth. And so it would be a much less destructive process. And so I think the environmental community I'm sure they'll approach it with many questions, as we all should, but we're very excited about, again, the possibility to create a source of lithium and potentially a battery production ecosystem in California that relies on new clean energy and cleaner techniques for extracting. So again, a lot of work to do there, but really exciting opportunity.
Perfect, thank you, Dee Dee. We have another labor agency question. This one is in regard to ag industry and whether the ag industry will be included to benefit from electric buses to transport farm workers and also to train farm workers in areas in the industry that is rapidly demanding more technology, knowledge of the equipment being introduced to the industry. So this is for Secretary Palugyal.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that question, Marco. I actually tried to type it in my answer, but then I don't know what happened. So I'm happy to answer this in person. So, agriculture, and we have conversations a lot about agriculture and agricultural workers. Absolutely, this is something we are looking at, how we integrate both the industry when it comes to electrifying not just buses, but trucks, what it means for those drivers and workers, but also how we integrate ag workers into all of the training and thinking around pathways to these new jobs that are going to be coming to the state. The long answer to give you the short answer, which is yes, this is something we are thinking about and focused on. That integration.
Excellent, thank you. And we're getting a couple of questions regarding the $450 million appropriation for the Local Government Sustainability Fund to supplement SURF. I know we do have a couple folks on the call here that could potentially respond here. So there's just additional ask for details regarding the $450 million appropriation to complement these efforts, specifically just any impacts and or opportunities for cities. We did get another question about whether cities and or counties are eligible. I don't know if Dee Dee, you'd like to respond. I know we also have staff on the line that can assist.
I can take it, Aracely. Sorry, I was just finishing my typing up my response. Hi, Sharon. We propose this funding for counties facing high unemployment and or high poverty. It's a metric that's currently part of GO-Biz's CalCompetes program, and there is a list of those counties currently online on the CalCompetes website. I believe there are 9 of them right now, and we envision cities working closely with counties that qualify to submit proposals for this fund.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. We're getting a few questions about other sources as well of energy. We're being asked about nuclear energy as well as solar and small storage, whether we're exploring that, and if there are any funds specifically for rooftop solar or small storage in the budget.
You know, again, unless there's somebody on the call who wants to answer that, I think that would be best left to consulting the parts of the budget that deal with the California Energy Commission in particular. We're happy to provide links to that or to follow up with a more specific answer. The short answer is yes, there are some funds for those things. Nuclear is a whole separate bucket, but anyway, happy to get you a more specific and correct answer.
Excellent. Thank you, Dee Dee. See here. There's a question here. This is for Secretary Palugyal. In September of 2020, a large majority of workers at the Marathon refinery in Martinez lost their jobs, and the reason was due to a drop in demand from COVID. What relief is there for them with them having already lost their jobs?
Yeah, this is, this pains me because it's very hard and I see these numbers weekly, right? So I see the numbers on dislocated workers across our state every week. And some weeks are good stories and some weeks are not good stories. And this was definitely not a good one. I'll just kind of briefly just talk about, there are specific dislocated worker funds that are available. And normally, these workers would go, these are local. So all this funding is implemented locally by the local workforce development boards and the community partners there that they work with to retrain and to help these workers find new jobs. In addition to these dislocated worker funds, there's many other, additional assistance funds that of course can be applied to locally, but also through EDD. The resources are vast, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this is very difficult for the folks that have gone through this.
Thank you, Secretary.
Yep.
Appreciate that. All right, moving forward here, we have some questions, perhaps for Dee Dee here. What will the impact on the new electric vehicle tax credits and incentives have on U.S.-Mexico relations? Will any of these credits be considered to be in contradiction to terms in the USMCA?
I will have to get Aracely, you may have some insights into that. I don't know, but again, happy to get back to you with a specific answer.
Yeah, we'll follow up on this one. We'll make sure that we respond. I have their contact information here. Next, we have quite a few questions on Lithium Valley, follow-up questions. We have a question regarding current lithium extraction technologies employ very few workers as compared to oil and gas. For lithium extraction in California's Lithium Valley, how many production and maintenance jobs are anticipated?
Well, first of all, it's very early days in the development of the resource there, but there's both geothermal, and there's already existing geothermal companies like Berkshire Hathaway have been producing geothermal power there for nigh on 30 years. That will increase both to provide power for the region and the state, but also obviously to extract the lithium. And as that industry expands, that will certainly create more jobs. And if we can bring the battery manufacturing ecosystem to the region, that will create additional jobs, and both with the development, design, manufacturing, and distribution of the byproducts of the lithium. And our intention is to work with the local communities there, from the community college system, high schools, community colleges, other resources, communities, cities, counties, representatives of workers from labor across the board, to make sure that we develop an industry that provides high road jobs. Those are high-paying, good benefits, career track kinds of jobs that we think that clean technology and clean energy can really accelerate while providing additional community benefits like clean air. So we're very excited about the opportunity. We think that, again, as we transition toward that economy, we have to be thoughtful about it. We have to make sure we invest in workers so that whole communities don't get left behind, but the upside can be tremendous.
Thank you, Dee Dee. There's another question in regard to infrastructure improvement. When will that infrastructure be improved in Imperial County, especially on the north end, to prep for mitigating transportation issues as lithium production may take off?
Yeah, I think all those things have to happen together. And again, that's why it has to be a comprehensive process that involves all the stakeholders, from local governments to workers, to worker organizations, to industry. And we will need to make sure that that infrastructure supports the industry, and that the industry then helps fund the infrastructure. And a couple of things. One, that's kind of the idea behind the $100 million Green Energy Technology Fund. This is a bit of a pilot project, but the idea is the state would put up money through tax credits for early stage industries. And if those industries become profitable, which we hope many of them will, they'll return not just the tax credit, but some additional revenue on top of that, so that Californians can enjoy those benefits, whether it comes in the form of infrastructure development or benefits for workers or what have you. In addition, there will be a royalty on lithium. It is not owned by the industries, although they'll help certainly develop it, and they're key to the process. But as there are for a lot of extractions, the people of California own the lithium, as it were, and so there'll be some proceeds from that can help fund the infrastructure to support the industry. So, it's again, early days, but I think the opportunities here are very exciting.
Great, thank you, Dee Dee. We are being asked by a couple of
One more thing, Aracely, and then as we employ more people, right? I mean, and sell more lithium, companies will pay more taxes. There'll be more, and people who are earning higher wages will pay some taxes too, and all that will go to help support the development of the infrastructure that will hopefully accelerate opportunity for everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dee Dee. We are being asked how stakeholders can engage.
Well, in the Lithium Valley, there's a Lithium Valley Commission, which is chaired by David Hochschild, who's as you know, the chairman of the California Energy Commission. So for the specific question of Lithium Valley, the Lithium Valley Commission is creating a community-wide process. First of all, there are representatives, including 2 tribal nations and community leaders and worker representatives on the commission, and they are producing a report by the end of this year. And through that process, they are certainly taking, hosting community meetings and other forums for people to provide input. And so we can provide a link to how to find out what the schedule of those meetings is and what the opportunities are to certainly offer perspective in that process.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Looks like we're getting a question about developing career pathways for solar jobs, and if there's a link that has an outline for funding at GO-Biz.
For solar jobs, I'm not sure if there's that we don't have really a fund at GO-Biz that provides career pathways for solar jobs, but there are certainly other, and maybe Secretary Palugyal has some insights more broadly.
Yeah, so there is a lot of funding that the state has invested in high road training partnerships, high road construction careers. This was in last year's budget. That funding is expected to go out. It's competitively bid out in the spring. I will say, to the extent that solar jobs can be considered high road, right? To the extent that we consider them good jobs, they pay well, or they provide on-the-job training for workers, they allow workers to grow in those careers. I would encourage companies to partner locally with, their community organizations, potential unions that might be involved in training to put a proposal in for funding, because this is something we're looking at.
Thank you, Secretary. Okay, we are coming down to the last few moments here of our webinar today. So if you have any additional questions, please send those along. Let's see, we have a couple of more. There's a question here being asked of Dee Dee. How shall we encourage the oil and gas industry to consider pivoting from drilling for oil to novel technologies not yet invented, to bore deep enough, cheap enough to profitably reach deep 6 to 10 kilometers, hot, dry rock geothermal energy as explored in Pivot 2020?
Well, I think generally we're certainly very open to, and in fact, often talk with the oil and gas industry about ways for them to transition. And I think that they are certainly exploring those. So for example, one of the kind of attractive elements of hydrogen is that it has a very similar distribution system to gasoline. And so some of the oil companies are interested in, can they both participate in the creation of hydrogen and green hydrogen, and then can they use existing distribution models to distribute that, particularly, well, across the board. I mean, they're very interested in creating it for everything from the passenger cars to heavy industry and beyond. So we have those kinds of conversations regularly. We're very excited to work with existing companies as they transition, as we all transition away from fossil fuels. So, again, open to many, many possibilities and already having conversations in those areas. And geothermal, I mean, that's again, another one. I mean, there are other companies who are already, like I said, involved in geothermal, particularly in the Salton Sea area. And we're certainly working with them as well.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Next question, veered toward Secretary Palugyal. Very supportive of your proposal for the 50 million wraparound funds to support oil and gas workers through the transition. Any details available on that? And can we increase the amount? Don't we already have enough info to know oil and gas industry existing decline is threatening workers now and greatly?
Hi, Ben. Yeah, thank you so much for your question. And I got a similar question earlier that I tried to answer by typing it in. So we still have to develop, this proposal more fully. And because this is also, in a way, I keep using the word pilot, it's going to inform a lot of our strategy in the long term for transitioning workers. There's definitely going to be a lot of stakeholder outreach around how we design this. So I just wanted to, let you know that more details will be coming, and there will be opportunities for stakeholder input into how this looks. And yes, we do have information. We know that people are transitioning now, and that's why the governor has put such an emphasis on this. He knows that people need support as they are leaving the industry and looking for other jobs. So absolutely, we definitely know that. Is it threatening everyone right now? Probably not. The transition has started and will continue, into the medium and long term. So this, this is a process that is starting, and more to come on this.
Perfect. Thank you, Secretary. And I have a question here for Director Assela. Several jurisdictions, especially smaller rural ones, do not have dedicated funds or staff for climate action planning, which consists of building out a framework for a just transition and new green job creation. How do you suggest advocating for CAP funding set-aside?
So, and that's a good question. So there are some existing technical assistance through the Strategic Growth Council that actually specifically funds the resource challenged communities in the state. So we'll be happy to send you information on that. And there is a significant amount of budget allocated now in this budget proposal as well, specifically to reach out to both rural and urban and all parts of the state that really need assistance, especially on climate related work. So we'll be happy to send you specific information on that.
Excellent. Thank you, Director. And with that, we are going to wrap up the Q&A portion of the webinar. Fantastic questions. I know there's a lot of interest on this, a lot of moving parts here. Thank you for all of your questions. For those that we did not get to, we will respond. Our staff will follow up with you. And there is a link that's been added to the chat that will direct your question to the appropriate staff member, and you'll receive a follow-up. We also invite you to the stakeholder webinar on proposed zero-emission vehicles and clean transportation investments in the state budget. That's scheduled for tomorrow at 3 p.m. and registration information can be found in the chat as well. And then please definitely encourage you to follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletters where additional resources are available, including a recording of this webinar. You'll receive the newsletter actually this Friday, and a link will be included on there as well, and it should be in the chat now. So with that, thank you all for joining us today. Appreciate all the interest on this, and thank you. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.